A month ago, nobody thought it possible. Yet the Eurozone's third biggest economy is being hunted just like Greece was.
Italy's economy has been in decline for over 15 years.
The future viability of the Eurozone itself may be determined.
There's no idea on how to grow.
The global financial crisis hit them particularly hard, and they struggled to recover ever since. Italy's GDP today is 15% lower than it was in 2008, and this was noticed by voters.
In this decade, our nation has experienced an unprecedented social and economic decline.
But if we look back in time, we can see that periods of economic slowdown have happened several times before, and each time it was followed by a period of unprecedented growth. In the 1980s, Italy's economy was stagnant, and they nearly tripled their economic output in just 7 years. During this time, Italy was amongst the fastest growing economies in the world. The same happened after World War II. Their economy was backwards and completely destroyed by the war. But they reinvented themselves and went through several decades of sustained growth. A similar pattern is visible in the 1990s, when their economy was stagnant, and in the early 2000s, when they nearly doubled their economic output. So this begs the question: is Italy once again on the brink of an economic boom? The historic trends seem to indicate that it's already overdue, but it's a bit more complicated. Italy today has a massive public debt. Much of their workforce is going to retire in the next few years, and there aren't enough young people to replace them. Their companies are small, they have invested relatively little in technology, and Italy has one of the largest black markets in the world, with such monumental challenges, but with a history of making epic comebacks. Can Italy do it again? This is Italy's economy with Hindsight. Italy's geography is a recipe for success. They are protected by mountains in the north and have easy access to the Mediterranean to all other sides. They have large swaths of arable farmland and a climate that's moderately temperate. Italy's beautiful cities are now attracting tourists, a sector that makes up about 10% of their GDP. But geography can also explain why these cities are where they are. Take Venice. Venice is strategically located at the head of the Adriatic Sea, with a river in a flat valley that's surrounded by large mountains. This geography made them practically untouchable, and it helped them flourish as a trade hub between Asia and Africa and Western Europe. Similarly, cities like Genoa, Pisa, and Amalfi were uniquely well positioned to exercise dominance in parts of the Mediterranean. Until the 19th century, the Italian peninsula was composed of small republics and city-states, and they ultimately unified into the Kingdom of Italy. After World War II, they became a republic, and Italy got almost its current shape. This is where the story of Italy's modern economy starts. After World War II, Italy's economy was in ruins, its society was divided, and another civil war was looming. Italy's per capita income was at the lowest since the beginning of the 20th century, and its economy was still very primitive. Italy was already a big player, but at the surface, it seems like they hardly had the conditions for economic success. But between 1951 and 1963, their economy grew on average with 5.8% per year. Then until 1973, it grew on average with 5% per year. This success is now referred to as the Italian economic miracle. Italy received billions of dollars in aid from the United States under the Marshall Plan. The US saw Italy as a fragile new democracy that was positioned at the border of the Iron Curtain. The new Cold War logic made them an important ally in the fight against communism, but that's when the Korean War started. Italian entrepreneurs provided the war effort in Korea with metal and manufactured products, helping the Italian economy grow and industrialize even further. Italy transformed from a mainly rural society with a destroyed economy in the aftermath of World War II into a global industrial power, and the material standard of living vastly improved for the majority of the population. But problems arose in the 1970s, and in the following decade, the growth just stopped. Many young people aged 24 and below were unemployed. There was also high inflation, which was worsened by the global oil crisis. Italy's government had a budget deficit of 10% of their GDP, which was the highest of any industrialized country in the world. All these problems led to the lira, the Italian currency at that time, to lose about 70% of its value in just 10 years, and this made it incredibly difficult to attract foreign investment. There were 5 years of no or negative growth, but then the economy suddenly exploded. In 1992, they had nearly tripled their economic output. This was dubbed by the mass media as the second Italian economic miracle. So how did they pull it off? One thing that they did really well is combat inflation. In 1980, it was at a whopping 20.6%, and they managed to get this down to 4.7% in 1987. This was primarily achieved through a reduction of the indexation of wages. Let me explain that in the simplest possible terms. When there is high inflation, workers will demand higher prices, and companies need to raise the prices of their products to keep up, and that causes more inflation. This is called a wage price spiral, and it's one of the most dangerous processes in the economics. To break this cycle, the wages were reduced significantly, and over time this led to less inflation. Italy was not the only country that saw such a growth spurt in the late 1980s. It was actually happening around the world to some extent. Italian entrepreneurs started new businesses, producing clothing, leather products, shoes, furniture, and machine tools. Italy was establishing itself as a producer of highly skilled crafts, and they built an excellent reputation. Today, if a product has the label "Made in Italy," a consumer is automatically willing to pay more. This reputation is an incredible advantage that only a few countries in the world really enjoy. But somehow that came crashing down again in the 1990s. In 1992, they had a larger economy than they had in 2002. So what happened here? During the growth spurt of the 1990s, the government lowered taxes and increased its spending. This created a lot of public debt. Have a look at this graph that shows Italy's public debt as a percentage of its GDP. It just skyrocketed in the 1980s and 90s. But this is not particularly a bad thing. It's actually a classic strategy for countries to grow their economies through debt. But Italy took it perhaps a little bit too far. And in addition, they were developing a massive problem with small companies and individuals that were not paying their taxes. The black market in Italy is huge. The Italian Senate estimates that they're losing about 132 billion euros in tax revenue each year. That's about the size of the entire GDP of Hungary. You might associate the black market with mobsters and criminals, but most tax is actually evaded by workers who get paid in cash, informal businesses, and small businesses that just don't pay. So Italy's public debt was piling up. They had little or poor oversight of who was paying their taxes, and this was a problem because they wanted to join the Eurozone. A condition for Italy to join the Eurozone was that they had to curb their national debt. So Italy lowered their spending, they raised their taxes, and as you can see on this graph, they were actually quite successful in bringing their public debt down. But in the 1990s, there was already a global recession. There was also high inflation, and all of this contributed to Italy's meager economic results in the 1990s. But that again was followed by a period of growth in the early 2000s. One major reason for this success was that it happened around the world. The global economy was doing very well, but it also helped that Italy now adopted the euro. This attracted more foreign investment since their previous currency, the lira, was notoriously unstable. That of course came crashing down in 2008, and Italy is still living with the consequences. Today, Italy's unemployment rate is 7.8%, well above the European Union's average of 6%. And if we look at the historic unemployment rates, we can see that this is already a huge improvement. Some of the major challenges of Italy today is their aging workforce. 24% of the population is 65 years or older, and many more are about to retire. Meanwhile, many young, educated Italians are migrating to other countries where wages are much higher. There's also a strong divide between the north and the south. For example, today, the province Lombardy in the north has a GDP per capita equal to 127% the EU average, while Calabria in the south is only 56% of the EU average. In terms of income, the north in 2008 had an average income of just over 30,000 euros, while the south had about 26,000. The north-south divide is visible in how Italy ranks on employment, life expectancy, education, and on how people vote. Italian brands still have a great reputation around the world, but they're becoming less productive. They haven't invested as much in technology, and they're being outcompeted. I'm naming all of these factors, and I could name many more, but the point is that when you look at this graph, you can see a trend that slowdowns are followed by periods of growth. But it's important to understand that there are always internal and external factors. If, for example, we add the GDP trends of Spain, Great Britain, and Germany, you can spot many similarities. This just shows how much macroeconomic factors also played a role. One thing that history teaches us is that periods of economic slowdown are an opportunity to implement policy changes.
Giorgia Meloni, who's set to become Italy's first female prime minister, has called for unity and promised to govern for all Italians.
In 2022, Giorgia Meloni was voted into office. Her government is ultra-conservative and far-right. She inherited an economy that was doing a little bit better after the pandemic, but that was already showing a decline in growth. Italy's public debt is the second highest in the EU, and they pay high interest rates over what they owe. Meloni's plan is to cut taxes and to increase their spending. Her hope for reviving the economy is strongly dependent on funds from the EU, but they do not yet meet the policy requirements to spend these funds. It will take some time before we can tell with hindsight how her leadership affected the economy. But in the end, Italy is just one of the many advanced economies that's finding it difficult to compete in an increasingly competitive global economy. And whether they'll manage to pull off another period of rapid growth depends on two things: how well the global economy will perform and how they will adapt to stay competitive within. Please consider watching one of these two videos next.